Good afternoon, everyone. I think hopefully we'll have a few more people trickling in soon, but this is also being recorded, so we can send it out to those who are probably in classes right now, but really want this valuable information. So my name is Heather Lewis. I'm the manager of the International Department here at Sault College, and I am very grateful today to introduce you to Elizabeth Long and Mary McDonald, who are joining us from Long Mangalji Law Firm based in Toronto. They're going to be giving you a presentation of the most important topics relevant to international students. A few housekeeping items. We do ask that you please put your questions into the question and answer box and not into the chat. We're able to better manage the questions and answers that way because we can mark them as done. Whereas in the chat, as more people talk, the questions just go away and we can't see them. So please use the Q&A and not the chat. Otherwise, I will pass it over to Elizabeth to get things started. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Heather. It's great to be here as always. All right, let's get started on this presentation here. All right, so today we're going to go through some of the most important immigration law rules that you guys need to know as international students. And the first thing that we want to talk about is what can you do right now when you have your study permit? The first thing you have to understand is even though your study permit may be for extended amount of time, you don't necessarily just have that student study, the student status, unless you're actively pursuing studies. What actively pursuing studies, it means that you are going to class, you are enrolled as a student, okay? If you are not actively pursuing studies, you will lose your status within 90 days of you stopping to study, okay? It doesn't matter, even if your study permit is valid, let's say until December of next year. If you don't go to school this semester, then you will lose your status 90 days after you stop going to school. Okay, that's what actively pursuing studies means. Now, there are two exceptions to the rule that you have to be actively pursuing studies. One is scheduled breaks. So these are breaks like summer breaks, spring breaks, etc., that are on the academic calendar for your school. And if you're on the scheduled break, it still counts as actively pursuing studies. So even if you're not going to class, but it's a scheduled break, you're fine. The other exception is more individualized. It's called authorized leave. So what authorized leave means is if you have some sort of issue, which means that you cannot go and attend class, okay, and go to school for a semester, you can go to your school and ask them to give you authorized leave. Authorized leave means it's authorized by the school. It can't just be a unilateral decision by yourself that you want to take a leave. You have to ask the school to see if they will give you permission to get authorized leave. If you get authorized leave, you can stop studying for 150 days, only one semester, 150 days max. Otherwise, if you continue on afterwards, even if the school says it's okay, you still lose your status after that within 90 days, okay? Now, let's talk about what you can do to work while you're studying, okay? Now, if you are a full-time student, you can work off campus while you are studying, okay? And normally it's 20 hours a week. Now, there was a policy that was in place last year. So those of you who had a study permit or applied for a study permit before October, I believe it was October 7th of last year, then you can work full-time off campus while you're studying until the end of the year. But for those who didn't have their study permit before then, and even if you had a study permit but it expired and you applied for a new one, Well, if you're on the new one, it also doesn't count. The normal rule applies, and you can only work off campus 20 hours a week, unless you're doing a co-op program, you have a co-op work permit. Okay. Now, if you are in the you have to be a full-time student in order to do that. If you're a part-time student, you cannot work at all off campus at all. Okay. The only exception is if it is in the last semester and you only take your part-time student in the last semester, you are able to work off campus. On campus, you can work full-time. And if it's scheduled break, you can certainly work as much hours as you want if you're off campus on a scheduled break. Now, one thing that is very important to note is once you've completed your studies, you're no longer a full-time student, okay? You're no longer enrolled as a full-time student at that time. What does that mean? It means, let's say you are taking your exams. Okay, well, then you're still a full-time student. Well, what if you finish your exams, you don't have your grades yet? Okay, you're still a full-time student. You're still enrolled as a full-time student. Now, when your grades do come and you get the notification that you have completed your studies, hooray, you're done. At that point, you have to stop studying, because at that point, IRCC says, well, you've completed your studies, therefore you are no longer a enrolled full-time student. At that time, you have to stop studying, stop working, okay? In order to start working again, you would apply for your postgrad work permit and you can start working full-time at that point. But do not think that it's a scheduled break after you finish your studies that you can continue to work even if your study permit hasn't expired. Once you've completed your studies, you get the first indication from the school that you've completed your studies, you cannot work at that point until you apply for postgrad work permit. The only exception to this is if you're in between programs. So let's say you've completed a one-year program and you have already been accepted to another one-year program, and it's only a semester away. Let's say I finished in April and I'm going to start in September, okay? Then that summer in between the programs, if you've already been accepted to the new program, you are authorized to work, and that's a scheduled break.
All right. So another really important thing to make sure that you always have while you're studying here in Canada is making sure that you have valid status. So this is extremely important, and we do recommend that you just check your permits and look at the date that's listed on your actual study permit as the expiry date. Make a note of it. And if, for example, your study permit is going to expire before you complete your program of study, it's really, really important that you extend your study permit so that you have valid status while you're here in Canada as a student. And that also brings up the issue of implied status. So when you submit an extension application, as long as you submit it properly and before the expiry date that's listed on your study permit, you'll hold what's called implied or maintained status. And what that means is while you're waiting for that extension application that you filed to be processed, you have implied status here in Canada and you can continue studying as long as you submitted that application before your first study permit expired. So if you have implied status, it does require you to be inside of Canada while you wait for a decision on the new application. So otherwise, if you leave Canada while you're waiting for that decision, your implied status will end and you wouldn't be able to study if you were to return until a decision was made on the application. So another important thing to talk about is also restoration. So let's say you wake up one day and you realize, oops, I totally missed the expiry date on my study permit. So from the day that your study permit says that it expires, you have a period of 90 days to apply for what's called restoration. So if you lose your status, you can apply to get your status back by submitting a restoration application. But it's really important to keep in mind that that 90-day timeline I mentioned is extremely strict. So you have 90 days from the day that you lose status, which is the expiry of your study permit. Or let's say you applied for an extension on your study permit and you get a refusal at the end of that. IRCC processes your application and it's refused. You have 90 days from the day of the refusal to submit that restoration application.
So Mary, let's sort of run through some scenarios with these guys.
Mhm.
Okay, let's say my study permit expires like end of November, November 30th, but my school, like my program ends December 31st.
Mhm.
So what's the last day that I need to apply for my study permit extension?
So you need to apply before your study permit expiry date. So if your study permit expires on November 30th, you need to apply before November 30th to extend your study permit.
Okay, so let's say I have applied for my extension, but you know, I don't have anything. Let's say I applied November 29th, okay? But then there's no decision on December 1st. Can I study then?
You can continue studying as long as you submitted your application properly before the expiry of your previous study permit.
Okay, but what if I forgot and December 1st, I get up and I'm like, oh shoot, my study permit expired. Can I study then?
No, unfortunately, you can't. You need to file an application for restoration. And then once that's approved, you can continue studying.
But if I can't study, I can't do exams even?
No.
No. So I lose the entire semester. If I had filed the extension a few hours earlier on November 30th, even, I could still have an implied status, right? But if I didn't, I would lose the entire semester. Do I need to leave the country on December 1st?
If you file for restoration, you can wait until that's approved. So you can stay here, but you can't study while you're here. You don't have to leave though.
Okay, so restoration. So let's say the study permit, it is approved in January of next year. I might lose that whole semester if, you know, it's approved too late, right? Because I can't study until January of that semester. There's a lot of issues, but at least I can stay. What if I forget completely and I don't file anything to extend it? And
Yeah,
it's past the 90 days.
that would be a big problem. At that point, you don't have status at all, and you can't apply to restore your status, so you do need to leave Canada at that point.
Okay. And one more scenario. What if I did file it on time, but I attached the wrong passport? And attached my old passport and my application was rejected because of that. Let's say it was rejected on January. Let's say I filed it on November 15th before my study permit expired, and it was rejected on, you know, December 31st.
So
At what? Yeah.
at that point, you have 90 days from the day you receive that refusal, the day listed on the refusal itself, to restore your status back to student, but you can't study until that decision is made.
Okay, so 90 days from December 31st. What if I get a letter on December 31st saying, oh, you didn't pay the right fees and your application was returned?
So at that point, you're still within the 90-day timeline but you still need to apply for restoration because your study permit has expired. So you need to stop studying, apply for restoration, and then wait for it to get approved.
But if my application was returned, when does the 90 days start counting?
From the day of your study permit expiry.
Right. So then it's actually counting from November 30th instead of the December one, because I didn't apply properly. So in order to submit your application, and in order for them not to return your application, you need to have three things. You need to show that you paid the right fees. You need to show that you submitted the right forms. And you know, you need to show that it was submitted to the right place as well. And it was submitted. Okay, so to file it inside Canada, that extends your status. If you file it outside of Canada, that is not going to extend your status. So if you file the wrong form with application for a study permit outside of Canada, then you didn't submit it inside Canada. Okay. Okay. Let's go on and talk about postgrad work permits. Now, postgrad work permits are really something that I feel like it's like the golden ticket. You know the golden ticket at the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Do you guys ever hear of that story? Well, there's only one, you only get one golden ticket in your life. And that's what the postgrad work permit is for. Okay. Now, that being said, the IRCC did come up with some policies this year and last year and the year before, where they did offer students a chance to apply for an extension for 18 months. That is something that is, these are special policies based on situations that the government got itself in. They're temporary policies. You cannot count on it being in place when you guys, your work permits, postgrad work permits expire. The normal rule for postgrad work permits is you only get one in your lifetime. And so when we do planning with our clients, we do have to see if you really want to get permanent residence, whether or not your postgrad work permit will give you enough time, because if let's say you have to have work experience and you have to have work experience for a year, if you only have a 1-year work permit, you don't have a job offer yet, will you have enough time to find a job, get your work experience based on the postgrad work permit? Okay, so the length of the postgrad work permit, if your program is between 8 months and 2 years, you can only get a work permit that is the same length of time as your program. If it's 2 years or more, you get a 3-year work permit. And if you do you can combine your program. So if you do a 1 year plus a 1 year, that equals to 3-year postgrad work permit as well. Okay. So before you actually say, how can I apply for a postgrad work permit? The first question should be, should I be applying for the postgrad work permit, especially if your program is only a 1-year program? The second thing is, and it's great that we're talking to you right now while you guys are going to school, is that in order to qualify for the postgrad work permit, you have to have full-time status in school for every single semester of your program except the last semester. Okay. Sometimes I get people coming to me and say, you know what, Elizabeth, this semester I have so many things going on. Some things, maybe they have a sick family member, or maybe, they themselves have issues, and somehow they just can't do an entire full-time school. In that situation, I normally might suggest to my clients, you might want to see if the school will give you authorized leave and you can take the whole semester off. If you take the whole semester off and you have authorized leave, you can still be eligible for the postgrad work permit. But if you only go part-time, and even if you say later on to the officer, well, it was because I was this and that, they don't usually care. And usually what will happen is you are not going to be able to get that golden ticket of the postgrad work permit. Okay, so be very, very careful. If you are thinking about going part-time and you except in the last semester, even if you were to fail a course during a semester, but you still went to all the classes and etc., just to fail the course, you still get eligibility for the postgrad work permit. Whereas if you dropped the course and became a part-time student, then you will lose the ability to get your postgrad work permit. So we talked before about when you can work when you were studying. And now we are going to talk about when you can apply for your postgrad work permit and you can work while waiting for the work permit. Right now in Canada, if you're applying within Canada, the processing time for a work permit, it can be around 5 to 6 months to obtain. And during that period of time, it's very important that you have the ability to work if you have a job offer while waiting for the work permit. Okay. And you can work if you follow this rule as to the timing of when you submit your application. The timing is, what I'm telling you, is different from something that you might get at the IRCC website. The IRCC website says you can apply for your postgrad work permit 180 days after the completion of your program. Technically, that might be true, but it's not what I would recommend. The reason being, remember one of the first slides I showed you was, what do you have to do to keep your student status? You have to actively pursue studies, otherwise you lose it in 90 days, not 180 days. And in order to qualify for a postgrad work permit, you must have a valid study permit. Okay, so if your study permit has expired, or you're beyond 90 days after the completion of your studies, then you have to file a restoration of status, and you cannot be working while waiting for your application for your postgrad work permit. So the rule you should keep in mind is apply when you're within 90 days of your completion of your studies, and also when your study permit is valid. If your study permit expires before the 90 days, then the deadline is your study permit. If your study permit expires after the 90 days, then the deadline is 90 days. Okay. Now, sometimes people say, you know what, my study program expires before my program is completed. What should I do? In this case, you need to apply to extend your study permit right away. Okay. Don't wait, and you can, continue to study on implied status. But the problem is that when you're ready to apply for your postgrad work permit, if you don't have a study permit in hand, you cannot work full-time while waiting for your postgrad. You have to have a study permit in hand and have applied for the postgrad work permit in time in order to start working while you're waiting for the work permit. So implied status does not work for this rule. You have to have a study permit in hand. All right, that's what we have about your temporary residence. Now let's move to the good part. Let's move to the permanent residence.
So as Elizabeth was mentioning, when you graduate, you could be able to get a postgrad work permit, which allows you to work for any employer in Canada. So you'll find after you graduate, if you're interested in applying for PR, many of the programs require you to have high-skilled work experience inside of Canada. So it's really important to know when you graduate whether, if you're about to take a position, you need to understand if it's going to be considered high-skilled or low-skilled based on IRCC's requirements. So the way that they determine if something is high or low-skilled is they've categorized all the different jobs into different what are called National Occupation Codes, or NOC codes, NOC codes. The NOC codes are divided into 6 tiers, and tiers 0, 1, 2, and 3 are considered high-skilled, whereas tiers 4 and 5 are considered low-skilled. And it's really important to note that just in the past year, November of last year, they changed this entire system. It used to be based off of different, like a different numbering system. And they also changed some positions in terms of which positions that used to be considered low-skilled became high-skilled, and some that were previously considered high-skilled became low-skilled. So, for example, truck drivers, personal support workers are now considered high-skilled, whereas some that were, as I said, previously high-skilled are now low-skilled. And there is a list online that's posted in these slides, which will be posted later. So understanding that skill level when you're graduating and when you're starting out a position is super important. Sometimes we see people will just rely on like what their friends did or use the same NOC codes there. But keep in mind that everything changed pretty recently. So don't make the mistake of just relying on what you've seen other people do. It's really important to figure out your individual job, what you're doing, and make sure that it is a high-skilled position to qualify you for PR.
So yes, we've put a list here to look at, you know, what the differences are between old system and new system. As Mary had said, you can't really rely on what your friends did because the system changes all of the time. And speaking of the system changing, what we are going to be doing is we're going to have everybody who signed up for this webinar, we're going to put you guys in to receiving on our news list, okay? So basically, when you guys leave here, the only way that we can communicate with you changes that might really affect yourself is through our newsletters. And, you know, so we'll sign you guys up there. We don't advertise, it's just about news on immigration law, okay? Okay, now let's talk about express entry. Express entry, many of you probably already have heard about it. It's one of the most popular programs for applying for permanent residence for skilled workers. And here's how it works. You have to, in order to start the process, you have to create an online profile. You get to create an online profile if you have you qualify under one of three categories: the federal skilled worker class, Canadian experience class, or the federal skilled trades class. Now, very important to note, once you create an online profile, you can go into the express entry pool, but when you get into the express entry pool, you have not applied yet for permanent residence, okay? Sometimes people say, yeah, I applied for permanent residence. I say, oh, when did you get your invitation to apply? Oh, I haven't, I just put myself into the pool. That is not, you have never applied for permanent residence. Immigration does not consider you to have applied for permanent residence. When you're in the pool, you have just, it just means that you have indicated to IRCC that you could qualify for permanent residence and that you're interested in applying for permanent residence under express entry. When you get into the pool, you'll get a series of points based on your background and if you have provincial nomination. That's called your CRS points, comprehensive ranking system points, okay? And every couple of weeks or so, the government has a draw where they invite people who are in the pool. Now, they do base it mostly on what your score is, but there are now more criteria. Sometimes there's no program specified, so everybody in the pool gets to apply. Sometimes they might base it on how you guys enter the pool. And sometimes they might base it on other categories as well. That's new, that just came into place in the summer, which I will talk about in a bit. Now, first, let's talk about how you can actually get into the pool. How do you even qualify for express entry? The first category, called the federal skilled worker class, is a category that many students may already qualify for, okay? The work experience that you need for this is 1 year of high skilled work experience that is full-time in one occupation, and it's continuous, okay? Note that I did not say that this work experience had to be in Canada. I have people applying from outside of Canada who can get it, okay, because this is a federal skilled worker class. It's not a Canadian experience class. It also allows for self-employed work. It also allows for work experience you would have gained while you're studying. So once you have this work experience, they also look at your language points. You have to have a CLB of 7 in order to qualify, but that in of itself may not be enough to actually get selected. It's just to get into the pool. Then they look at other things and see if you have meet the minimum score. Most of you guys, if you have the work experience and the language points, probably will meet the minimum score. And then you also have to have settlement funds. Normally for a single person, it's between 13 to 14,000. Adding family members, you're adding a few thousand, 3,000, 4,000 each family member. Okay. Second category is called the Canadian experience class. Now, the work experience you need for the Canadian experience class is very different than the federal skilled worker class. The work experience you need for the Canadian experience class is 1 year of high skilled work experience in the last 3 years of application that is in Canada, that is work experience you gained when you are not a full-time student, and is a work experience where you are employed by a Canadian company, a Canadian employer, okay? So you have to be employed in Canada. That means that you cannot be a contractor. What is a contractor? Is it a person who has a contract? No, everybody who is employed should have a contract, okay? A contractor is not something who is just part-time. Doesn't mean that it is someone who has a ending to the contract. A contractor means it's someone who is not an employee. A contractor is like someone, if I'm hiring someone to paint my house, okay? And I say to that person, okay, I'll give you $1,000 to paint this room. And they say, okay. And at the end of it, I'll give them $1,000, okay? It's not someone who I would deduct taxes for, like income taxes for. It's not someone I deduct CPP-EI. I wouldn't give them a T4 at the end. That's a contractor. So when you go and find a job with someone, if an employer says to you, oh, okay, you know what? I don't really want to bother my accountant. I'll just pay you the money and you deduct your own taxes or whatever. That's a contractor situation. And you don't really want to do that because then you will not qualify for the Canadian experience class. And the work experience for the Canadian experience class is also the Canadian work experience that will give you significant points after a year as well when you want to get out of the pool. The other thing is you can't really just go and create a company and hire yourself as well. If you have sufficient control over your as the employer as well, then that is counted as self-employment as well. The third one, I'm not going to get it too much into. Not very many people qualify for this. It's for people who are in the skilled construction trades, who have LMIAs or certification as well. Okay. So, now that you're in the pool, well, what kind of points can you get to get out of the pool? Well, here are some of the categories. The first one is age, okay? Now, for those of us who are a little bit older, you know, it doesn't help when the government says, oh, well, you're not going to have that many points. Well, that's exactly what the government says, okay? So after the age of 30, your points go down -5 points, -6 points every year. After 40, your points go down fast, like -10, -11. By the time you're 45, the government stops deducting points, but that's because you got a big fat 0 for your age. Now, compared to someone in their 20s who have 110 points, that could be a very significant difference. So you can't do much about age except to apply earlier rather than later. Education. If you have 2 programs, it doesn't matter where they're from, but if you have one program that is at least 3 years in length in college or university, and another college or university program on top, that really will give you a boost in your points. Language. If you don't have any Canadian work experience, in order to have a chance to get selected, most of you guys will need IELTS, the CLB of 9, which is IELTS of 7 in reading, writing, and speaking, 8 in listening, or CELPIP of 9s in every category. If you have Canadian work experience, it could be a little bit lower, but we're still looking at CLBs of 7, which is a 6.0 in each category for IELTS and a 7 for CELPIP. That may or may not be enough, okay? Relevant Canadian work experience, that is work experience that is the same as the one that I described for the Canadian experience class. The foreign work experience, if you have high-skilled work experience outside of Canada, you can get some points for that. If it's different levels, 1 year, and then the 3 years, there's another jump. Spouse's education, language, and Canadian work experience could count if they have high skills in those areas. Otherwise, if they don't, they may deduct a little bit from your score. By the way, in terms of a spouse, okay, who is a spouse? A spouse is someone you're married to, but also in Canadian immigration law, a spouse is someone that you can be a common law spouse, okay? Common law spouse means you have lived with that person for at least 1 year in a conjugal relationship. Now, it's very important to note that if you are in a common law relationship, that you represent yourself on all of your forms. Whenever you make an application, it's going to say, what is your marital situation? Is it single, common law, married? If you're common law, you have to say that you're common law. Otherwise, it's misrepresentation. And misrepresentation comes with it a 5-year ban from applying for permanent residence. And it could also bar you from sponsoring your spouse afterwards as well. Okay? So make sure you mark that 1-year anniversary after you've lived with someone for 1 year. That means then under Canadian immigration law that you are family. Now, most of the time, if a couple is a family, we want to try to have both of them apply at the same time, okay? Almost all of the time, it would probably be the better choice because then the entire family can immigrate together. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but make sure you have proper consultation about that. Provincial nominee programs. And Mary's going to talk about that for the Ontario government. Every provincial government has an agreement with the federal government to allow themselves to also choose people that they want to get permanent residence. Those are called the provincial nominee programs. Now, if it is an express entry linked provincial nominee program, not all programs are express entry linked. Some of them are, some of them aren't. The ones that are linked to express entry, if you get nominated for that, you get 600 points added to your score, which basically assures that you can get invited to apply. Okay. Previous study in Canada, if you're studying in Sault College, 1 or 2 year program, then you can get 15 points. 3-year program, you get 30 points. Arranged employment. Now, a lot of people think, well, I have a arranged employment because I have a job offer and I have a postgrad work permit. I have arranged employment, right? No. Arranged employment is very specific. You do not get arranged employment if all you have is an open work permit like the postgrad. You have to have either an employer-specific work permit or LMIA as well. If you have brothers or sisters who are Canadians or permanent residents in Canada, you get some points. Fluency in French is very, very important. If you are fluent in French and you can pass a CLB 7 level for your French level, then you can get significant points for express entry. And later on, when we talk about the category-based draws, you'll see you also have a benefit there. And trade certifications, not very many people have that. That's mostly with the construction trade. I think truck drivers also have certification, etc. Yeah. All right, so this part is new. Starting in July of this year, the government now also has special category-based draws for certain occupations and French speakers. And what happens is if you have a CLB level of 7 or above for your French, and you're in the pool, for example, then the government will have French draws, and only those people who qualify with the CLB level 7 will be able to be in the pool. And so because of that, the points then for these specialized draws go down. Now, besides the French level, there's healthcare occupations, STEM occupations, trade occupations, transport occupations, agriculture, agri-food occupations as well. So with these occupations, if you have 6 months of work experience in the last 3 years, for these occupations, then there are specific draws for each occupation group. Okay, and because if you belong to these draws and you're in the pool, then even if your points are a little bit lower, because you're only competing with other people in your group, the points tend to be generally much lower than the general draws as well. I put a link here. We'll be sending out these slides to everyone who registered, but there's a link here for how to see whether or not your occupation is in one of these specified occupations.
Right.
Hopefully.
So as Elizabeth mentioned, there are things, the provincial nominee programs, some of them for Ontario are linked to express entry. So they allow you to get more points for your express entry score. And I'm just going to talk a little bit more about what those programs are and a little bit about how they work. So provincial nominee programs, or you'll also hear them called P&Ps, are where the province has an agreement with the government so that they can invite so that the province can invite people that they want to get permanent residence. So Ontario's provincial nomination program is called the OINP for short form. And the OINP has different kinds of streams that are specified for people that Ontario wants to invite to become PRs. So there are some express entry streams which are directly linked to your express entry application. So the way that it works is you can't just go and apply to be in the express entry OINP stream. You have to be in the express entry pool, and then only if Ontario is interested in you. So you can't say, "Hi, Ontario, give me a nomination for your OINP express entry stream." Ontario chooses you. They will give you a notification of interest if they want to invite you to apply through the Ontario stream. And at that point, you you put yourself into the express entry pool, you wait to receive a notification of interest, and once you have that notification of interest, you can get a nomination and then apply with 600 extra points on your express entry application. So who do they give these notifications of interest to? So there's 3 categories that they have identified. The first one is the human capital stream. And for the human capital stream, you do need to have a bachelor's degree, but it doesn't have to be a bachelor's degree from Canada. It can be from overseas as well. They specify specific things they're interested in for this stream. So for example, this is similar to the new category-based draws as well. The human capital stream has prioritized people in tech historically. They can also do other types of applicants, like people who have job offers, and or sometimes people who have certain work experience. So we're seeing this stream kind of mimic what the new category-based draws are doing, which does indicate that there might be some changes coming in the next few months as these new changes for IRCC's express entry kind of trickle through the system. We'll have to see what kind of draws happen under the human capital stream. The next one is French speaking. So that's also very big for express entry right now. So this one is for people with a bachelor's degree and a high level of French, which is at a level of CLB 7, and a CLB 6 in English could be invited for this stream. And then the third one is targeting people in the skilled trades. So if you're in one of the identified occupations, typically related to construction, and you've been working in that occupation for at least 1 year in Ontario out of the last 2 years, you could qualify for this stream. You don't need a bachelor's degree or any specific education. As long as you do have a work permit and have been working for 1 year in that skilled trade, you could potentially get a notification from the province. And then, so those are streams that are connected to your express entry application. So that's when you're already in the pool for express entry. That is how those streams work, but there's actually other streams through the OINP that aren't related to express entry at all. So these are streams where you would go and apply to Ontario, and you do say, "Hi, I'm interested in going through one of these other OINP streams." So these streams have different requirements than the express entry link streams, and they also have a different application process. So with these non-express entry streams, the process is that you register your application through the expression of interest system. So you basically, if you're qualified for this one of these streams, you put yourself into the OINP pool for the particular program that you qualify for. And then once you're in that pool and you've registered your expression of interest, you're waiting for Ontario to do a draw. So they then would give you a notification of interest. And Ontario does draws. They don't announce the schedule beforehand. It's a little bit less consistent than express entry. So it's best to get in the pool as soon as possible once you qualify, because you can't get a draw if you're not in the pool. And even if, you decide to just wait one more week, that could be the week that they did decide to do a draw in your category, and you could miss a good opportunity to get an invitation. So if you get that invitation, they give you a letter called a notification of interest, and then you apply for your nomination. And once that goes through, you then are allowed to apply for PR. So where express entry, you're in the pool, you get the ITA, you apply for PR. This, you go into the pool, you apply for your nomination, then you apply for PR. It's got a few more steps than express entry. And the streams themselves are also different. So they give you points in a way that's different than express entry. Some streams require you to have a job offer, which I'm going to explain in a second. And then there's also other streams like the PhD stream and the master's stream, which don't require you to have a job offer. So for both the for the master's and PhD stream, one thing to note that's really important is if you need to apply for these streams within 2 years of graduation. So that means you have to register your expression of interest, receive an invitation from the province, and apply for nomination before it's been 2 years since you've graduated. So if you complete a master's degree or a PhD from Ontario, don't wait around, register your expression of interest right away. And then I'll go into the job offer streams. So these streams require you to have a job offer from a specific an employer who meets specific criteria in Ontario. So for all of these streams, the business that's supporting your application, the business that's giving you a job offer, needs to have been in business for 3 years. If it's inside of the GTA, they have to show that their gross income in the last fiscal year was over $1 million, and that they have 5 full-time Canadian citizens or PRs as employees. And if they're outside of the GTA, then they have to have a 500,000 income in the last year and 3 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees. And the job offer itself has to be full-time and permanent. So permanent does mean no end date on your contract. Within the job offer streams, there's 3 different categories. So there's the international student stream, the skilled worker stream, and the in-demand job stream. The international student stream is for people who have completed their program of study in Ontario. And it's similar to the streams I mentioned before, you also have to apply within 2 years of graduation. You have to have graduated from an eligible program, which means that you've done a 2-year program or you've done a 1-year postgraduate program from an eligible school. For the 1-year programs, one of the admission requirements for your program has to have been that a degree was required. So do keep that in mind if you're thinking of applying through this category. Look at the admission requirements of your program if it was just 1 year, and make sure that you had to have had a degree to apply. You need a high-skilled job offer for this, for the international student stream, and you need to be getting paid at least what's considered the low wage for your occupation according to your location of employment. For the skilled worker stream, you need to have at least 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years in the same occupation as your job offer. The work experience doesn't have to have been in Canada, and it doesn't have to have been in Ontario. It just has to be able to show that you do have the 2 years of experience within the last 5 years. It also has to be high skilled, and the wage for this category is it has to meet what's called the median wage for your location. The nice thing about this stream is there are no specific education requirements. So if you have that job experience and you have a job offer, this could be a good stream to look into. And then finally, there's the in-demand job offer stream. So the OINP has a list of occupations that qualify for this stream. It's not just every occupation, it's a specific list of a NOC code that you need to meet to qualify. This is one of the only streams that does include low-skilled job offers and positions. So if you, or for example, your spouse is in a low skilled position, you could potentially qualify through this stream. But you do need at least 9 months of experience in Ontario in that same occupation, but it can be with a different employer. And the salary requirement for this stream is the median wage level for that occupation in the location of your job offer.
It's great that you mentioned it's either them or the spouse. Yeah, because guys, it's not just for you to apply under these categories that we are mentioning. It's also if you have your spouse and they are in Canada, and they have job offers, some of these streams, maybe not the international student stream, but the skilled worker or in demand stream might work for your spouse to be able to apply for permanent residence as well, even before you graduate.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, when I have clients and they ask me, what school should I go to? Sault College is one of my top recommendations. Not only is it a fantastic school, it is one of the best international departments, student departments. As you all know, they care about you guys so much. But in terms of immigration, it is also, you guys have a great advantage going to Sault College. So starting off, let's talk about the federal program of express entry. You have an advantage because you're not in Quebec. If anybody wants to go to and live in Quebec, then to immigrate now in Quebec, basically you have to know how to speak French, and it takes a very long time to do that. And you can't go through express entry system if you're in Quebec. So great, you're not in Quebec. Number two, you are also outside of the GTA, and you are in a Northern Ontario community. What that means is you have a lot of advantages for points when you're going through the OIMP, the Provincial Nomination Program that Mary was just talking about for Ontario. Okay, you have a lot more points because you studied outside, not only studied outside of GTA, you are also in a Northern Ontario community that you studied in. Now, the third advantage is the RNIP program, the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot, because if you were to study in a program in Sault Ste. Marie, that is one of the very few participating communities in all of Canada, okay, and you have a job offer in Sault Ste. Marie, then you can participate through this program and get permanent residence as well. So how does it work? So first of all, you either have to have 1 year of qualifying work experience. This cannot be work experience where you're self-employed. You have to have been working, and the tier has to be, well, it depends on, what your job offer is. It's a little bit more complicated for me to explain right now, but you have to have at least 1 year of work experience that's kind of at the same level as the job offer. It doesn't have to be in the same occupation. Or if you don't have the work experience, you've graduated from an eligible study program. It has to be 2 years in the community in Sault Ste. Marie. Okay, 1 year won't count, and you can't do a 1+1 either. It's 2 years, and you're a full-time student throughout the 2-year program, and you are applying within 18 months of graduation, and you have been in the community at least 18 months while you're studying. Okay, so don't go and study remotely. Plus, distance education will also get you, disqualify you from postgrad work if it's over 50%. But if you're studying in the community for 18 months, then you, with a 2-year program, then you can also qualify for the RNIP program. Now, beyond that, you have to have a qualifying job offer in the community. And this is where it becomes one of the most important things to note. It's the community that selects whether or not you will be able to, you will be approved for the RNIP program. Once the community selects you, then we apply to IRCC, but they really just check, admissibility. Now, the community in Sault Ste. Marie, they have some specifications on who they want to select. Not all job offers qualify. For example, the food service industry. They no longer accept any job offers in the food service industry. So you won't be able to go through that. But other kinds, we can certainly check with them and see whether or not they would accept. Okay, if they accept your job offer, your benchmark language benchmark, for the most part, most of you should meet it if you're going to Sault College. And if you're working in Canada or you have settlement funds, then you should be able to qualify for this program. Okay. Finally, one last program that I kind of wanted to share with you guys is the caregiver program. Now, again, this could be you, but it could also be your spouse as well, who have open work permits when you have a study permit, right? So in order to qualify for the caregiver program, you need 1 year of full-time work experience in Canada where you're hired by a family to take care of their children, their elderly people, or disabled person in their home, okay? I would emphasize the elderly or disabled because the children, the one to care for the children, and it's a different category, which also it gets filled up very, very fast, like within a day when the program. The second one, it's not filled up that fast at all, okay? So I would normally choose the elderly or disabled person in their home. If you cared for them for 1 year, you have your postgrad, post-secondary, or your spouse, they have to have a post-secondary education, not a postgrad, post-secondary education credential for 1 year. It could be from anywhere in the world. And they meet the language benchmark of 5, then you can apply for permanent residence under this program as well. Okay. All right, so we've talked a lot about different programs, and I'm sure it must be a little bit overwhelming for a lot of you. Let's basically talk about what practically you guys need to do.
So the first tip is always have a plan as to what you need to do to get to your immigration goals. So not only the short-term plan, but also a long-term plan. If you're planning on getting PR eventually, just make sure that you're on the right track. Attending a webinar like this is a great first step to just make sure that you're doing what you need to do to get where you want to go.
Yes, and I would also say, what we're telling you guys right now is general information, but we need you guys to also have a specific plan for yourself. And I'll put up this slide afterwards as to how to contact us if you want to have a consultation about your specific plan, okay? Don't just rely on other people and say, oh, okay, my friend did this, oh, it must work for me. No, everybody's situation is different, and timing matters. Even if you have the exact same person with the exact same situation as yours, if you're applying a few months later, the whole situation can change, okay? Because the laws and the rules change. Now, once you know what your plan is, you need to do things in order to get yourself there, okay? Go and practice for the IELTS exams, for example, or self-pip exams. Those exams, sometimes 0.5 of one of the skills could mean a difference in 90 points for express entry, for example, okay? So you have to make sure that you do your absolute best and you know how to do these exams. It's not just, they don't just test your ability in the language, they test your ability to do the exams, okay? Sometimes you may need to do another program, depending on the person. Maybe your program that you're doing right now only gives you 1 year of work permit, postgrad work permit when you graduate, and that might not be enough, okay? So, and you may need to get the high skilled work experience. Maybe you need to find another job because the work experience that you're doing is low skilled and you can't get PR by then. Once you have a plan, then it's about execution.
The next thing you need to do is make sure that you stay in status and you don't misrepresent. So keep a close eye on those expiry dates on your study permits and always tell the truth to immigration. Lying or providing incorrect information on an application can result in a 5-year ban from Canada, and that's the last thing you want for your long-term immigration plan.
And finally, hopefully this doesn't happen to you, but if your application is rejected, please do not wait. Please don't just call the IRCC call center and say, hey, what do I do now? They might be very nice people, they might be very friendly people, but they are not on your side. If your decision is unfair and you need to challenge IRCC, those people are not going to tell you to go to federal court. Okay, but federal court notice period is very, very short. It's only 15 days if your answer is inside Canada or 60 days outside of Canada. Even if you don't do a federal court, go to federal court, you may want to do a reconsideration. If you yourself go and write something to immigration and you don't know what to say, you don't know what to present, and your reconsideration is rejected, and then you come to a lawyer like myself, I can't go and file another reconsideration. You only get one kick at the can, okay? And also timing is so important. You know, restoration of status, postgrad work permit eligibility, all of those things, you don't get a second crack at it. So make sure if any time, hopefully you apply with a lawyer so this doesn't happen, but if it is that you get a rejection, make sure you contact a lawyer, not a consultant. They are not able to go to court and they don't have a law degree. Okay, so make sure you go to a lawyer who specializes in immigration law in order to deal with your situation. All right, so here is our information if you wanted to contact us about any consultations. We're happy to help you. If you tell us that you're from Sault College and you've attended the webinar, it is a discounted consultation fee that it's only $100, and we meet on Zoom and we'll go over your situation and come up with a plan for you. Okay. Let's go over some questions.
We have a few good ones here. Would you like me to ask them to you?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Okay, so we have someone who is wondering how they apply for their co-op work permit now that they're here in school.
Okay, and they changed the course in school, right? Okay, so if you change your course and now it has a co-op, then you can go and apply for the co-op. Just apply online. You can say that, hey, my program changed. Here's my program acceptance letter, and you should be able to get your co-op work permit.
Great. Someone has asked, can we apply for a postgrad work permit before we complete our studies, for example, the last semester while doing co-op, or can we be absorbed by the co-op we're working for?
You cannot apply for a postgrad work permit before you complete your studies. In order to qualify for a postgrad work permit, you have to show that you have completed your studies. You have to show your transcripts to show that you've been a full-time student throughout your entire period. And it's also good to have that completion letter from the school as well. You need to show those two documents. Otherwise, you do not qualify for postgrad work permit.
Right. Okay. I'm not sure what this one means. Compulsory to take a drop. I'm going to dismiss that one. I don't think it's related. This is another one about the same co-op work permit question for changing programs. Someone is asking if we could clarify if the work experience gained as a full-time student is of any use for CRS score.
Not for the CRS score with regard to the Canadian work experience. If the work experience you gained as a full-time student, even if you're working full-time, it doesn't count as a rule for your work experience in Canada. Now, if you were applying for the OIMP, on the other hand, the OIMP does count work experience that you've gained while you're a full-time student. That full-time work experience could also count towards your eligibility to apply as under the federal skilled worker class as well. So it really depends on the plan, but it's not necessarily a bad idea to work while you are studying as well.
Right. Okay. I'm not sure what these next two mean. Postgrad work permit and validity. And then this one is can you count the work experience gained in the part-time job while being a full-time student? You just answered that.
Mhm.
And then we have a question about changing into dependent status. I think this one is quite specific to someone's situation here.
I think it's someone who has, who are both studying, have study permits, and then they want to change after. So a person is always a spouse, right? A spouse is a spouse. If your spouse, and so they can also always qualify for a spousal work permit, even if they have a study permit as well. You just need to apply for the spousal work permit and you show that they're eligible for the spousal work permit. Now, once let's say a person, let's say you're applying for your postgrad work permit. In order for your spouse to get a open spousal work permit, you have to have a job offer. It used to be you have to have a high skill. Now it's any kind of level of job offer for your spouse to be able to get the open spousal work permit.
Right. Okay. What kind of services could we offer during a consultation for a student from Sault College?
So during the consultation, we go over a plan for you. We do not go and advise you on how to apply for specific application, okay? That you have to retain us as your lawyers, as your representative to help you apply for an application. But what we can do is tell you, okay, you want to get a permanent residence? Here's what you might qualify for now. If you don't qualify, here's what you need to do in order to qualify. What are their chances? What do you need to keep in mind? We come up, that's what an initial consultation is for. Oftentimes people come to me is, how much is it for me to get permanent residence? Okay. And they say, I don't want to do a consultation. I just want you to tell me how much it is. And I said, look, okay, I can't do that, right? I don't understand what your circumstances are. It's like someone going to a restaurant and demanding, how much is dinner? When people don't even know what you want to eat for dinner, okay? So it's very important that you go to a consultation where you sit down with the lawyer to say, okay, tell me, what is your circumstance? What are your goals? What do you need to do? And then we can come up with a plan to tell you how to get there.
Great. Can we apply for extension for both study permits and work permits before 1 month of expiry day?
Yeah, you can certainly apply. Now, the IRCC website says you should apply for an extension 1 month before, 30 days before. That's a recommendation. That is not the law. The law is as long as you apply for an extension before your temporary status expires, you have implied status, okay? Now, you can apply certainly for your study permit extension, once you know that the end date of your study permit is going to be longer than what you have right now. Normally what's supposed to happen is the officer is supposed to give you a study permit that is valid for 90 days beyond when you complete your program to allow you enough time to apply for your postgrad work permit. That's the rule, okay? And so if they give you a study permit, for example, oh, I finished my program on end of April and they only give me a study permit until the end of until April 30th. That's not enough time for you to apply for the postgrad work permit. You can always apply to extend your study permit at that time.
Right. Okay. This person is taking ECE at Sault College in Toronto, and they're afraid that this program is in demand in the GTA for PR applications. And they're already 45. What could their edge be for PR approval?
Okay, so this is something where we have to sit down with you and do a consultation where we go through a in-depth analysis of your situation and say, okay, here's what you can do. Here are some of the jobs that you might be want to do. Maybe a caregiver position might be good, or maybe you can find a job somewhere else. Whatever it is, that's more than a 1 minute analysis. It's more like a half an hour conversation that we will have to have with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we've got, if I wait to complete my studies before applying for postgrad work permit, my study permit should have like 1 to expire. hope that's enough time to apply and get my postgrad work permit. I think it's that situation you were saying earlier about that tight timeline.
Yeah, if you don't have enough time to apply for an extension.
Great.
Mhm.
If I change my program from 2 years to 1 year in the same college, what should I do?
I think you're fine. You can just, change it. You don't need to really, I think if you're in the same school, I don't even know that you need to notify IRCC. If you're going to a different college, you should notify. But if you're doing the same school, I think you'll be fine. Just apply for the postgrad work permit afterwards, if that is something that you want to do.
If I'm here in Ontario with my wife, we can apply together in the same application, or do we need to apply individually?
Everybody has to apply for their own application, but if you guys are applying for permanent residence, one person can be the principal applicant and the other people can be the dependents. Again, we would need to have a consultation with you to see which way is the best.
And what if me and my partner with no marriage certificate are on a study permit, but one of us plans to change to dependent visa? Is it possible?
If you're common law, and one person wants to get a spousal work permit, then certainly if you can prove your common law relationship, then that person would be eligible for open spousal work permit.
Yeah. Can I apply for my second year course after I complete my postgrad work permit?
A second year course, you can certainly apply for a study permit after to study in something else. The thing is, though, if your postgrad work permit is still valid, and you don't have permanent residence yet, you may be wasting your opportunity, your golden ticket opportunity, by just going to school and you not being eligible for permanent residence. Like I said, you only have one opportunity to apply for postgrad work permit. So sometimes I have people who didn't know any better. They graduated, let's say, from a college program, and then they wanted to go do a master's afterwards. And they applied for the postgrad. They're eligible, so they apply and they get the postgrad work permit. They go and do a master's, and then after they are finished the master's, they come to me and say, "Okay, what do I do now?" I said, "Well, you're not eligible for the postgrad work permit anymore, and you don't have eligibility for any other work permit. So your opportunities for working in Canada, you don't have a work permit to work. So because you can't work in Canada now, it's very limited, and you may not be able to get permanent residence. So don't just go and apply for a postgrad work permit just because you can. Get proper advice as to whether or not that is the best choice for you."
Great. And then we have, can I work for 24 hours in a week?
Well, it depends on your eligibility to work. So if you just had a study permit that you just got a month ago, and you want to work off campus while you are studying, you're limited to the 20 hours a week. Okay. All right. Wow. I think we're done. Oh no, one more. One last question. Okay.
Here in Sault Ste. Marie, is it eligible to apply for your postgrad work permit in any other province like Alberta after you finish your studies?
Yes, of course you're eligible to apply for a postgrad work permit in Ontario. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Mary. I just want to thank you for your time today. Thank you, students, for attending and for sharing your questions. And I believe, because Elizabeth and Mary, you have the registration list. So will you be able to send out the recording of this to everyone who had registered later?
Yes, absolutely. What I do, it does take me some time to edit, but I'll send out the slides and the recordings. I'll send you guys the link. And it's always, all the recordings are on our website at lmlawgroup.com/videos as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.